Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, smoking pot. Because today's subject is, quick cough, nice mild sativa, but still, is the passage in Congress at last of a bill making pot legal nationally according to federal law and granting amnesty and forgiveness to anyone who has ever been convicted of a federal marijuana crime. And needless to say, I'm 420 friendly. By the way, 420, just in case you're interested in this, is not only Adolf Hitler's birthday, but the reason that it became synonymous with pot, those of you who are curious, has to do with 5 high school students in 1971 in Marin County who were going to high school and meeting by the statue of Louis Pasteur, the developer, among other things, of pasteurization. Louis Pasteur, pasteurization, you get that. The famous French scientist. And they would meet each day to smoke, and their code was 420, okay, because they would meet at 4:20 p.m. after school to smoke pot by the statue of Louis Pasteur. Yada, yada, yada. Somehow that has become synonymous with International Pot Day. Not quite sure how it made that leap, but that's how April 20th was chosen. It wasn't to honor Adolf Hitler. Now, as I'm sitting here, I'm a little bit high, and I'm a little bit high just to show you, by the way, that you can be perfectly functional, at least I think I'm personally perfectly functional, and be high as a kite. I, by the way, have my medical card. It's a lot different than it was when I was in high school. I go to a clinic called Curaleaf. That's here in Phoenix, Arizona. I am not being sponsored by Curaleaf. This is pot, by the way. When I was a kid, we used to get it. This is Chem Kush, in case you're curious, and this is a, let's see, what is it? It's a sativa blend. For those of you who are unfamiliar with pot, sativa is what you smoke during the day, and indica is indicouch, which means you smoke it at night, because when you smoke indica, you aren't going anywhere. There is a difference between the two. Although most of the pot you buy in pot dispensaries in the states where pot is legal is a hybrid of sativa and indica. But and by the way, so is Chem Kush. It's a hybrid, but it's basically sativa. Anyway, I bring this all up because as an anti-politist, all drugs would be legal, not just pot. And of course, the state of Oregon in the last election decriminalized drugs, all drugs. And decriminalization, by the way, is not the same as legalization. Decriminalizing means you're not going to go to prison for possessing or using the drug, but you could still go to prison for selling the drug, and that's only a halfway step. I think that legalization, and plus it just introduces a whole new bureaucracy. I mean, hey guys, like we're adults. I'm 63 years old. I smoke pot, okay? I freely admit I smoke pot. I smoke pot almost every day, if not every day. And you know what? Do you know why I do it? Do you know the reason why? And I have a medical card, and yes, I have arthritis in my neck, and I have arthritis in my shoulder, and that's all legitimate. And pot does make it feel better, although I find I get a better result on my left shoulder in particular. A little side hint here as I go on. CBD, the ingredient, it actually mostly comes from hemp, and you can buy it. And you got to be very careful because a lot of the CBD brands are shit. But if you buy your CBD at a reputable place, and it's a reputable brand, I use Penguin, just to throw it out there, and I've done a lot of research. They tend to be, I think, pure, or not pure because no one sells pure CBD, but containing CBD to the level in which they advertise. If you just rub it on a spot, I find it's not very effective. But I found that if I put on the CBD lotion and then I get some DMSO. DMSO is dimethyl sulfoxide. You can pick it up at mostly any health food store. And if you can't get it at a health food store, you can get it at a horse feed. DMSO is horse liniment. And it's been used for decades and decades and decades to soothe the sore muscles of horses. And horses don't get psychosomatic responses, so DMSO works. Now, it's a little bit controversial, and I know that if you are of the absolute mainstream of medicine, you're going to reject what I'm about to say. But DMSO, in addition to being an anti-inflammatory, is also a phenomenal carrying agent. It's almost like taking an injection without taking a shot. So if you put on your CBD lotion first and then rub a little DMSO over the top, it tends to push, at least this is my theory. I am not a microbiologist or anything that approaches medical in any way, but my result has been a tremendous relief in pain in my left shoulder when I use CBD in conjunction with DMSO. The only side effect, there is no side effect with CBD. It doesn't make you high, but DMSO, some people, I don't, but some people taste garlic the minute they put it on their skin. It goes, it just, I don't know. To me, that's not the most, I mean, personally, I like garlic. I've never actually tasted it when using DMSO, but I've known a lot of people that do. So there you go. That's the side effect. And if you do some research, you'll find out. It's harmless, but you will, in, about half the cases, people will taste a little bit of garlic as soon as you put it on your skin, but that goes away. And anyway, I'm digressing. That's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about Congress passing. See, this is what happens when I'm high. I got off on a little tangent. Congress passed, when I say Congress, the House of Representatives, virtually unanimous. I think 5 Democrats voted against it, but only 6 Republicans voted for it. This is why I can't stand fucking Republicans, just between you and me. You know, on one hand, as a anti-politist and anti-politism is essentially libertarianism with a different system of democratic choice put on top of it. Instead of election, we do it by selection. And again, you can pick up the Manifesto of Anti-Politism, A Radical Reset on Amazon and read the details of the system. But basically, we're libertarian in our philosophy. So you would think we might gravitate more towards Republicans because Republicans tend to be free market and more libertarian, except when it comes to their right-wing religious / old-fashioned, you know, currently based on polls, 68% of Americans, not Americas, Americans, that might have been pot. 68% of Americans believe that pot should be legalized. The only group that says it shouldn't be legalized is the group over 75 years old. And, you know, I grew up seeing a movie, and Mr. Producer, if you can find this and put up a clip, it is one of the funniest fucking things you've ever seen. It was called Reefer Madness. I swear to God to you. And I think it was made in the 1920s or the 1930s. It's a horrible old black and white thing showing people going apeshit while smoking pot and basically losing themselves. And, you know, here I am. You saw me do it. Here, I'll do it again. Just so that you, plus I just enjoy pot. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a very small water pipe. And it's just enough for me to do this. So here I am. I'm high as a kite, and I'm not losing my mind. Now, Reefer Madness made pot look like heroin. Anyway, I think that's what these 75-year-olds are still referring to because they think it's bad. And the saddest part of it is that most of the Republicans in the Senate, where this bill's going to have to go next, are old fuckers. And the president-elect of the United States is an old fucker and seems to have problems. That's Joe Biden with pot legalization. And so I don't think this is really going to get any further than the House of Representatives because the Republicans have a stick shoved so far up their ass that they can't breathe. However, I celebrate this today, this one small step for man, one giant step for mankind, paraphrasing Neil Armstrong. What pot has to do with landing on the moon has only to do with the cloud that's in my mind now from being a little bit high. Here's the thing. It's inevitable. Pot's can be nationally legal. But listen, let's not stop there. And when I was in prison, let me just share with you, you know, the statistic is, if you were to go look on the internet right now, that about a third, about 30 to 40%, depending on whose statistic you're looking at, of people in state and federal prison right now are there for drug charges, quote unquote. But drug charges mean possession or sale. But I'm going to tell you from firsthand experience, and I know what I'm talking about, that almost everybody is in prison on drug-related charges. I'd say 95%. Because while they may not have been arrested for possession or sale, and they might have been arrested for violence or burglary of some kind, that's almost always in association with drugs being illegal. In other words, if you're a drug dealer and you are doing a business deal with another drug dealer or a customer, and that customer fucks you over and doesn't pay, and or other dealer fucks you over and doesn't pay, what recourse do you have but violence? In other words, when you're in an illegal business, it's not like you can take them to court. You can't go to small claims for the claims under 5,000 and the civil court for the claims over. You got to the only recourse is violence. So if drugs were legalized, in addition to the fact that our prisons would empty out, we'd save God only knows how many billions of dollars we waste every year on the drug war and incarceration both. We clear the records and talk about, those of you out there who support movements like Black Lives Matter, the most important thing we could do for most young black lives, not most, but the enormous population of young black men in prison would be to legalize all drugs and expunge the record of anybody currently in and release them because it's stupid to keep them in once it's legal. And if these people would not, I'm telling you from firsthand experience, these people would not be violent if they were in regular life. The only reason they resort to violence or to theft or breaking in, it's not because they enjoy burglarizing your home. It's not because they enjoy looting. It's because they have to pay for these ungodly, expensive drug habits. And the only reason that drugs are expensive is because they're illegal. So, for example, and my source for this is actual living drug people who I knew firsthand and personally while both at Yuma and Kingman prisons in Arizona. The production cost of Mexican heroin, I can tell you this for a fact, is 1/20th what they sell it for on the street. So instead of, and this is not what it's, I don't, what's really funny, just digressing slightly, here you have a population of people in prison who mostly didn't graduate from high school and are functionally illiterate, some of them completely illiterate, but they're fucking wonderful with grams and metric weights. They're unfucking believable. I mean, if you say to a heroin addict how many grams at an ounce, I mean, he can tell you. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. The only reason it's expensive is because it's illegal. So if drugs were legal, drug addicts could go down to Walgreens or CVS and pick up what they need. It'll be safe and properly cut. It'll be much, much cheaper. They can support their habits on minimum wage jobs. I mean, you could work at McDonald's and be able to afford a heroin habit if it didn't cost 20 times what the production cost is. In other words, the producer could produce it and charge double and make 100% profit. And if he didn't have to, run it with submarines and trucks and pay off border guards and dig tunnels and go through the expense of trying to avoid the DEA, which doesn't catch most of it, but they still have to go through the motion because nobody wants to get caught. Well, the bottom line is it adds to the cost of the consumer. So basically, by legalizing, everything becomes cheaper. The free market comes into play. Drugs become readily available cheaply to addicts. Now, that brings up the subject, of course, of that drugs are bad for you. Are they really? And have we ever had an adult discussion about drugs in this country? I mean, okay, so you just watched me toke up, and I'm feeling pretty goddamn good right about now. Is that bad for me? Is it bad that I like to take the edge off a little bit during the day? And that at night, by the way, I don't use pot 24 hours a day, but occasionally, if my mind is overactive or if I've just watched a movie that won't go off in my head and is keeping me up a little bit, I'll take a hit of indica and put myself. Is that bad? Is that a bad thing? I mean, basically, life is a shitstorm, my friends. And the question that we all have to ask ourselves as adults, and this is nothing to do with children at this point, we'll get to children in just 1 minute, is as adults, if we choose to check out, is that necessarily a bad thing? Now, the other thing you saw me do is I took a hit of pot off of a water pipe, otherwise colloquially known as a bong. Now, in doing that, I took smoke into my lungs. Now, there's a lot of research on cannabis smoke that says it is not dangerous, but if it is, I understand there's a potential risk because it is dirty. I mean, I don't want to tell you. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is the bowl where the pot is that I'm smoking out of. You see how dirty it is. I do clean it off. I use a cleaner called 420. Again, I'm not being sponsored by 420 cleaner, but it works great. Anyway, the point is, it's dirty. I know it's going in my lungs. I'm an adult. That could cause a problem for me, but at the very same time, it's not like I smoke it like cigarettes. When I say I use pot nearly every day, yeah, I might take 3 or 4 or 5. I mean, you just saw me take 2 of what'll probably be 4 hits for the whole day. And I'm willing to accept the risk. I'm an adult. I can weigh risk and rewards. I don't need a nanny state to tell me what's good and what's bad and whether or not it's, okay for me to do this as an adult. The same thing would be true. I don't drink alcohol, by the way, at all, 0. But if I did, I know that if I overdo it, it's not good for my liver. And I don't think there's a living drinker alive who doesn't know that. But it's legal, and the government somehow trusts drinkers, although they didn't during Prohibition, to make adult decisions and decide whether or not this is something they want to do. And some people live miserable fucking lives. Let's just level with each other. A lot of us don't live that TV sitcom happy, Ozzie and Harriet from my generation or the Huxtables from the 80s generation, although now he's in prison for, chasing around women, but that's another story. And, whatever the current sitcom is that shows life with a happy ending, I don't even know because I don't watch them anymore. But anyway, life just doesn't go that way for most of us. And for some of us, it really goes, to shit. Drive around some of the areas in your town, the poor areas, and you'll see people living in single wide trailers that you wouldn't keep your pets in. And conversely, there are people living in the richest part of your city. I can go drive into Scottsdale, which is the richest part of where I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's beautiful and it's well manicured, but you don't know what horrible shit goes on behind closed doors. You don't know what's going on, what pedophiles and incest and child beating and drug abuse and wife beating and infidelity and all kinds of shit goes on behind those doors. If that weren't true, psychiatrists, psychologists, priests, rabbis, and ministers would be all out of work. I mean, the reason that we know this is going on is because of the huge industry, both religious and non-religious, that's in place to support people that get into this kind of shit. And a lot of people, particularly the victims of this kind of stuff, occasionally their only option is to really check out. And why is that a bad thing? For some people, life is so fucking miserable, longevity is not the goal. And why is that wrong? I mean, I understand, for example, I don't smoke cigarettes either, but I understand why some people do. And I don't understand why we tax cigarettes, because disproportionately the people that smoke cigarettes are the lower half of the income ladder. So by taxing cigarettes, we're basically taxing poor people. And the question is, why do we do it? And the answer is, of course, cigarettes are bad for you. And the theory that's put forward, which is junk science, is that cigarettes, raise healthcare costs across the board. Cigarettes don't raise healthcare costs across the board for two reasons. Number one, everything that you've heard about secondhand smoke is bullshit. Secondhand smoke does not. By the way, it's unpleasant, and I don't like to be around it. And and I don't even date smokers, by the way, because I don't like kissing ashtrays. But if an adult chooses to smoke a cigarette, and I happen to be in the same room, it's not going to cause cancer, okay? And if I fell in love with a smoker, highly unlikely since I don't date them, and I was around secondhand smoke every day, it still wouldn't make my cancer risks or emphysema risk or anything else any worse. That's bullshit. That's junk science. Yeah, I know there are studies, but the methodology of those studies are bullshit. Any study that's been done with solid science shows that secondhand smoke causes no problem at all. It is just unbelievably unpleasant, and I hate the shit. And I'm glad they don't allow people to smoke in restaurants, but bars, I think, should be up to the bar owner, because a lot of drinkers smoke. And anyway, I digress. I don't want to get into that. But adults can make their own decisions, right? And if there were no smoking laws, some restaurants would have cigarette smoking, some wouldn't. And the ones that chose to have it would cater to that audience. And the ones that chose to not would cater to people like me. And the free market would decide. No regulation, no bureaucrats, no spending, no nothing. Now, turning that to drugs, guys, what's wrong? I mean, look me in the eye. Okay, here we are. We're just chatting, just the two of us. Tell me you don't check out every now and then. And if you're anti-drug, tell me that you don't pick something that's legal like alcohol and pretend like it's not a drug, even though it kills 20 times more people than heroin does every year, maybe 100 times more people. Let me just think. Statistically, it's more like 20 times more people than heroin does every year. And it destroys families and everything else, and it's completely legal. Look, all drugs should be legal. Then we can treat them for what they are, which is a health problem. And then when people get to a point in their lives when they want to do something about their addiction, and a lot of people are functional addicts and just live their entire life as addicts and go to their grave as addicts and are great people. I'll cite the most famous example I can think of is Winston Churchill, a raging alcoholic who smoked cigars like a chimney and probably died younger than he needed to, but he made enormous contributions despite the fact that he was drunk half the time. And what fucking difference does it make? Kennedy had Addison's disease and was shooting down booze in the Oval Office. I mean, because you check, and I'm sure that we've had presidents already smoke pot in the White House. I'm pretty sure it was Barack Obama. God bless him, okay? By the way, no judgment there. Just saying, I view him as most likely to have smoked pot in the White House. And if he did, sure as shit, his aides have. I mean, pot has definitely made it into the West Wing. I can't prove it, but common sense tells me that has to be true because I know it's everywhere else. And so anyway, congratulations for the first part of this podcast. That was wandering, wasn't it? Pot is also wonderful because it just makes everything seem so brilliant. This could all seem like gibberish to you later, but I'm having such a good time doing it. What the fuck do I care? Anyway, yay for the Congress. And, the only good thing that would come of the Democrats winning the Georgia runoffs, and they're not going to. The Republicans are going to win at least one of those seats, and then it's going to be Republican Congress. But if by some happenstance there was a Democratic Congress, this law would actually become the national law. But it's not going to happen. So, but anyway, listen, congratulations on a good first step. Yay. Now, slightly pivoting, keeping on the subject of medication, but this time the COVID vaccine. I'd like to change the subject and switch to the COVID vaccine. The news today is, and as I do this, this is Tuesday, December the 8th, I believe it is, or 9th. Let's see. Or is it the 10th? I don't know. Anyway, I can't. I'm high. Fuck me. Anyway, UK has begun vaccinations using the same Pfizer vaccine that is currently wallowing in the FDA. Now, why is the United Kingdom administering the Pfizer vaccine today, and why aren't we getting it, and our most at-risk population being the old people with, if this is overwhelmingly true, the old people with complications, heart disease, lung disease, etc. How come we're not giving it to our old people and the English are giving it to theirs? And the answer has three initials, the FDA. The FDA should be shut down. It is far past the point where it does any good at all, and it is nothing but an obstruction to treatment to everyone else. Now, why do I say this? Why don't we need an FDA? I mean, for those of you, and here's where you have to divorce yourself from bad Hollywood movies where the capitalists are out to somehow fuck everybody while getting rich. They always forget the central theme of free market capitalism, which is it's all based on voluntary transactions. I don't have to do business with you, and you don't have to do business with me. So if I'm going to try to get rich in business, the only way I'm going to do that is by attracting you to do business with me. And the only way I'm going to attract you to do business with me, I can advertise and get you in the door. But once you're exposed to my service or my product, it better be fucking good. One of the things that all great companies have in common is they all have great products or services. Like, you can bitch all day long about Amazon.com, but the truth is the reason they put so many other retailers out of business is because they do it great. Absolutely. They deliver the products to people conveniently at a price lower than they can get almost anywhere else. And they're exceptionally good about warranty and backup. And no one makes you do, but you can bitch and moan about Amazon. I love to, like, for example, as an author and someone who's written books, I love listening to authors bitch and moan about how Amazon fucks them. These are guys who wouldn't get anywhere near the exposure they get but for Amazon.com. And one day someone will come along and do it better, and then Amazon will go out of business, just like Sears, Roebuck, and Kmart before them. But for now, it's the greatest thing going, and it's the greatest thing going because they do their job well. And when the day comes that they go out of business, it will be because they don't do their job well enough. Whatever's replacing them will do it better. Just like, let me think of another company that's gone. Goodbye, Polaroid. When you can print up, it's still in business, but by the hair of its chinny chin chin, because computers and color printers put them out of business. It's as simple as that. So that's the construction, the creative destruction of capitalism. But the FDA gets in the way of all that, okay? And I bring this up because Pfizer would not I bring up all that voluntary stuff because it would be very bad business for Pfizer to poison the population of the world, okay? As the first to the market with the COVID vaccine, can you imagine how fast Pfizer would no longer exist if this vaccine turned out to be poison? So if we're injecting COVID vaccine to tens of millions of people and that vaccine wouldn't be safe, the number one culprit, first of all, if they knew about it, they'll go to prison. There will be plenty of criminal consequences. But on top of that, the civil consequences, there won't be a Pfizer any more than Monsanto has been bankrupted by asbestos lawsuits, just to give you one example. Silicone breast implant lawsuits, by the way, which were all based on bullshit science. That's a good example of the legal system fucking over a perfectly good company over junk science, but I digress. That's just to show you that you can bring a whole company down when they fuck up, whether the fuck up is legitimate or illegitimate, and I don't want to get into the fine points of who's legitimate and who isn't, but the bottom line is Pfizer didn't get to be Pfizer by putting out drugs that hurt people. Now, what they do, because a lot of drugs have side effects, is they publish a long list of side effects, and the reason they do that is so that you are aware of what they are, and you can make an adult decision, okay, you and your doctor. So what would be wrong if the FDA just didn't exist? A drug came out. The drug company sent it to, put it out to doctors and hospitals and other providers. They give you the list of risks. Maybe we just require that it be written in plain English in large print so we don't have to use magnifying glasses to read it. We go through it and we decide yes or no. Are we going to try this? If I'm dying of cancer and there's a treatment that might kill me, I'm still going to try it. I mean, I'll leave it to an adult to make an adult decision. If it kills me a month earlier, in my view, and I have something like poor Alex Trebek had pancreatic cancer, which is a guaranteed killer, and there's I don't give a fuck how far out it is. Why wouldn't I try it? I'm going to die in a couple of months anyway. I mean, and most tragically of all, there are zillions of what are called orphan diseases that affect particularly children in very small numbers. And drug companies don't like to get messing around with it because the FDA makes the process so fucking impossible for such a small market. But if the FDA was out of the way, drug companies could afford to develop drugs for these orphan illnesses and help in particular children and people that get these weird, rare things. And it would become economically viable for them to do that because they wouldn't have to spend all the money they spend in federal bureaucracy. What does federal bureaucracy really cost? I know you hear this all the time, but what does it all cost us? You want to hear a mind-blowing statistic? And I invite you to Google this. Each of us, every American is cost, ready? Brace yourself. It costs $15,000 a year from every family in America to comply in regulatory costs. And we pay that. I know you don't write a check that says, for $15,000 for regulatory costs. You're paying it in the form of higher prices for every good and service you buy. So every product you buy, every drug you buy when it goes through the FDA, everything else. Why are drugs expensive? The FDA. That's why drugs are expensive, because it costs such a fucking fortune to get through the process to bring them to market. The drug companies can be trusted, frankly. And I know that, the Hollywood movie mill has put out, movie after movie where the evil capitalist poisons the population, and saves the secret drug for eternal life for themselves. But that's all fiction, guys. If someone invented the drug that gave people eternal life, let me tell you, there's an old saying in business that says, feed the rich, live with the poor, feed the poor, live with the rich. There's a lot more poor people than there are rich people. So if you can make that drug cheap and give it to everybody on earth, and you can charge everybody on earth, the 8 billion people, $10 each to live forever, you don't have to charge any millionaire $1 million or 10 million or 100 million because you got richer than shit charging $10 to everybody, right? You get it? And I know that's a weird, dramatic example, but that's the example I came up with my mind on pot. But having said that, and I do these things extemporaneously. I have an outline when I go into this, but I'm just going where my mind goes. So, and my mind just turned off just there. So the point of the matter is, if we got the FDA out of the way, we would have gotten the COVID vaccine a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. And this would all be in our rearview mirror. I mean, the solution to COVID, guys, isn't lockdowns. You know how I know that is I look at the state of South Dakota, the one state with a sane governor. And she takes a lot of heat. Her name is Kristi Noem, but the truth of the matter is she did not lock down the state. She did not make a decision on which business was essential and which business wasn't, for the simple reason, as she said correctly, that's not government's business to decide who's essential and who isn't. She simply puts out the information on a constant basis to the residents of South Dakota. She has put strong shelter recommendations in place for older people with risk factors. And yada, 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 the death rate in San Diego. And South Dakota is lower than California, lower than Illinois, lower than New York, and lower than New Jersey, all of which have draconian lockdowns in place. In South Dakota, the kids are in school. In South Dakota, people have gone to work. South Dakota is running a budget surplus this year of $19 million. Which is, by the way, it doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, South Dakota doesn't have as many people as your state might if you're like watching this in New York, so their budget's going to be comparatively smaller. But the fact of the matter is, she's the one governor in America who trusted the people who live in her state to do the right thing based upon the information she shared, and voila, everything turned out fine in South Dakota. Plus, and when you add to that, the vaccine is the only real cure to all of this. We'll reach herd immunity when about 40% of the population is vaccinated. There are reasons for that I can go into. And I know, how can you protect the whole population if 40% are vaccinated? But if the 40% are the most at-risk population, and that's where the spread really takes place, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we can go into that. No, we're never going to go into that. That's just fucking boring, I'll be honest with you. I'm never going to discuss why those statistics work. Just trust me, they do. But anyway, the bottom line is this. We're almost out of this thing, and we would have been out of it 2 to 3 months ago if it hadn't been for the fucking FDA. And the fucking FDA gets in the way of everything. For example, back on the subject of drugs, psilocybin, which is the magical substance in magic mushrooms, for those of you who have never tried them. And I freely tell you that years ago, I did try and enjoyed psilocybin magic mushrooms. They're wonderful. But they've discovered that psilocybin and also LSD, lysergic acid diethylamine, otherwise known as acid, has huge potential benefits in psychotherapy, the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, just to name one particular situation, but seems to be very helpful in the treatment of addiction and getting people off of very dangerous drugs. You know, no one's ever died of an LSD or mushroom overdose. They're harmless. Yeah, you can have a bad trip and it can be unpleasant. And by the way, people who have bad trips are unhappy people to begin with, and they shouldn't be tripping. And they know most people who are like, for example, angry alcoholics because their real, inside comes out, or sad alcoholics are going to get bad trips when they try, for the same reasons, for when they try LSD or acid, so just don't try it. But for the rest of us happy campers, it's really a fucking party. If it were legal today, I would absolutely do it. And it should be legal. They should have never been made a Schedule I drug. You can't get addicted to them, and they can't kill you. I mean, and they have enormous benefits. And the FDA has been, until very recently, restricting all research on using psychedelics to improve psychotics. They're beginning to open the door, but this could have happened. We were aware of this benefit a decade ago. The FDA is just in the way. And by the way, why are they slow now? How come we don't have the vaccine now, even though the FDA is supposed to be rushing it? Because they won't, because they're a fucking bureaucracy and they're covering their asses. They're worried that in the 1 in a trillion chance that there's something weird with the drug, that they'll get blamed if they go too fast. They don't stop to think of the people that are dying every fucking day because we're not coming out fast enough. Risk and reward, folks, risk and reward. Let's trust that Pfizer doesn't want to poison the entire planet and destroy their business over a vaccine. And the vaccine, it's going to have a lot of doses, but they're not going to make any money on it. I know you guys are going to find that hard to believe, but this is not going to be a major profit center for Pfizer or for Moderna. Okay, this is a public service they're doing. I mean, they make a lot more money on lots of other drugs that have a much better margin. This is a mass production of a mass distribution of a drug for the good of mankind, believe it or not. And the solution has come from, what a surprise, private industry. Okay, I can't tell how much time I've spent because I'm high, but I think I've spent enough time on today's podcast. Okay, so let me sum up. 1, yay for the House Democrats and the small handful of Republicans that voted for the legalization of marijuana from federal crimes, and amnesty and the expunging of records to anyone ever been convicted. And if you Republicans in the Senate would somehow smoke a little pot, and if you don't know how to do it, give me a call. I'll share with you a few different techniques. I would say try vaping. It's easy on you. And just see how wonderful it truly is, and stop this bullshit. Let's legalize this. And oh, by the way, I just have to digress. This just comes to mind. The argument, I love this. I don't know if it was Chuck Grassley. Oh, it was Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, who, grow some lips, Mitch. And so anyway, one of his complaints about the pot bill was saying that the Democrats are wasting time in Congress passing pot bills when we need to get to, COVID relief. This is the guy who was blocking COVID relief for the last 6 months along with Nancy Pelosi in a 50-50 game of political chicken. But I digress. Okay, so this guy says they need to be spending time on COVID, as if you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You're telling me that 435 people can only do one thing at a time? Since when was Congress designed constitutionally to do one thing at a time? Since when is it somehow a time grabber to pass one bill that no one has to think about, that has a brain in their head? Hey, legalize pot? Yes. That's it. That's all the time it takes. I mean, there's really nothing to it. You don't have to do a lot of deep thought about it. It's not like this hasn't been discussed 3,000 times, 3 billion times, Mitch, you dumb fuck. And, please, don't tell me that, we have to concentrate on if the Congress can only concentrate on one thing at a time, we're wasting 435 times 175,000, which is their salaries, plus their fucking staff. What a waste. If that's all they can do, if that is as crippled as they are, fuck, we're in trouble. Okay, listen. You guys get the drift. Anyway, fuck the FDA, bring on the pot, bring on the mushrooms, bring on the acid, let's have a party. And while you're having a party, pick up a copy, how's this for a transition, of A Radical Reset, the Manifesto of Antipolitism, Democracy by Selection, Not Election, the almost perfect form of government, because nothing that human beings do is perfect, but this is as close as it can possibly be. Read it. You can pick it up as a paperback copy or as a download onto your reading device from Amazon. Or if you're a Prime member, which all of us are, you can read it for free in the Kindle Lending Library. And when you do, every time you turn a page, I get paid a slight little fraction of a penny, but that's helps support this podcast. And we all live happily ever after. Amazon has this basic fund. So even though I'm saying it's free to you, it's not, I'm getting paid. Anyways, thank you, Amazon. Another reason why Amazon is great for authors and so on and so forth. Anyway, click the notification button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And we got some tough times ahead. And, if you watch my last video on why 2021 is going to be the worst year in history, one of the best ways to deal with the worst year in history, well, let me demonstrate for you one more time. I said I only do this 4 times a day, and this is going to be the 3rd time on this podcast. So I'm going to get wasted. So as soon as I turn off the lights, I'm going to go, camp out on the couch with Pepper and eat some chips. Pepper's my Airedale Terrier, by the way. Who's worried about 2021? Hey, thanks for joining me today. And until next time, this is your stoned Uncle Herbie here at the Radical Reset, enjoying marijuana and wishing you nothing but a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later on this week, and until then, take care. Bye-bye.